Howdy, bitches. Ya girl Ada here, to tell you that this review will lean heavily on the review of the first game. It is advised that you watch these back to back. Now, suck my robot winky.
Now, despite Hideo Kojima's name being sprinkled all over this game, he actually had very little to do with it. You see, the first game, as I mentioned in my previous review, had a fairly strong ending despite being somewhat lackluster overall. And without spoiling anything, the ending was as strong as it was because of it mostly being a very well-placed open end. However, the first game's cinematic director, Shujo Murata, had his own idea for a plot involving Jehudi. The idea in question apparently made Kojima as Genki as a tsundere with a chastity belt, so he gave Shujo the go-ahead. So really, all Kojima did was look at a draft of what could potentially be the game's script and said, "Yeah, well, do it, well, yeah." And thus, the awkwardly named Zone of the Enders, the second runner, came to be. Now, it's no secret that the first Zone of the Enders, while certainly not a bad game, was a bit lacking in some areas. I mean, the gameplay was simple and repetitive, the voice acting wasn't perfect, and for a game made by Hideo Kojima, the cutscene quota wasn't even anywhere near met. This game, however, changes all of that. Where the first game's story felt more like a pilot episode to an anime, this game feels more like a 6-part OVA. And it's not like I'm just pulling the anime comparison out of my ass either, as they actually went so far as to add anime talking heads to the codec conversations to make it even more anime-y than the first game, and there are no awkward-looking, big-headed, low-poly anime characters either. And only the mechs are rendered in 3D. So I guess Otacon wasn't lying when he said that it's just like his Japanese anime. Although he may have been over-exaggerating a little, as it isn't quite on the same level of quality as, say, Xenoblade or Persona 4 in terms of anime-ness. But it certainly leaps and bounds above the first game. Anyway, like I said, the game's story doesn't actually pick up right after the open end of the first game, as it takes place 2 years after and now stars our new hero, Dingo Egret. And if having a name sounding like a Star Wars reject wasn't enough, Dingo is also a minor. Luckily for him though, he just so happens to stumble across the orbital frame Jehudi. Well, I say luckily, but he kinda gets attacked by Baram forces who came to take it back. But just like Leo, he seems to be quite good at actually piloting the damn thing, mostly because he is an ex-Baram soldier.
And so begin the adventures of Dingo Egret, filled to the brim with drama, robots.
And also he's lost all of his vital organs and now he's fused together with Jehudi and he'll die if he tries to leave, so yeah. Now, even though it's presented as its own story, there are still some ties to the first game. I mean, first of all, it does take place in the same universe, and the events of the first game will be referenced here and there. Also, most characters do actually return, and Leo is still dicking around as well. That said, the game does a good job of explaining everything, so you don't really need to play the first game to understand the plot. Anyway, like I said, they definitely upped the production quality overall, and it certainly shows in the cutscenes, as in that the game is filled with them. And yeah, it's not quite Metal Gear, but to me, that's definitely a good thing, as I feel like having tons of lengthy cutscenes would be kind of a detriment to a game that's supposed to be all about fast-paced action. Still, it definitely has more of an anime-like feel than the first game did, even though the voice acting is still kinda awful. Now, the story isn't the only thing they improved upon, as the gameplay, while still very similar, also has a lot more to it. I mean, it's still not exactly Devil May Cry, but at least it does more than just looking dynamic, despite the base combat being almost exactly the same. So the gameplay still involves a lot of bursting around and bashing square. But luckily, they added quite a handful of mechanics, and the game doesn't feel like a demo's worth of content stretched to fit an entire game. First of all, the game now has some actual combos, as you're able to end every 3-hit combo with a finishing move by pressing one of the face buttons. And apart from that, they also expanded on the grabbing mechanic quite a bit. I mean, in the first game, you could grab an enemy and push them away. But now, you have the ability to throw enemies into each other and into surroundings, and use them as shields and swing them around like a sword. And not only that, but you can also grab objects from around the level to use as weapons and shields as well. But perhaps the biggest addition to the combat is that enemies now do a bit more than just waiting to get killed. Thing is, now there's more than just 2 enemy types, and they'll actually work together as well. So what they'll do is that in some instances, there will be a commander unit who'll be able to synchronize with other enemies to form a party. While in a party, the enemies will be much faster and harder to take out one by one. And even outside of this party mechanic, the enemies tend to do a lot more in general. I mean, in the first game, you had the ability to fight only one enemy at a time. Now, this is no longer the case. So while you're able to fight more than one enemy at a time by slamming them into each other or using the homing missiles, they also have the ability to attack you as a group as well. For instance, one of them will be shooting at you from afar while another one will come at you hacking like a madman, all the while a support unit will create force fields to protect them. And not only that, but the AI is a lot better as well, so they'll actually tend to put up much more of a decent sword fight than they did in the first game. I really like it a lot, and it's very chaotic in a good way, as it now feels like how I think a fast-paced mech battle should feel. The only issue I have with this is that the lock-on system can be a bit confusing when there's a lot of fast-moving enemies on screen at once. Especially when you're trying to aim at a specific enemy that's faster than the others and you're in a tight space and you need to defend someone at the same time and... But that only happens in 1 or 2 instances, and most of the game takes place in fairly wide open areas, so I guess it's not that much of an issue. Now, as I said in my review of the first game, this one pretty much shits all over it in every aspect, while still providing more of the same. Although, because of its linearity and being more story-driven, it has less of an arcadey feel than the first game did. So it's not like it renders the original obsolete or anything, as they still have their own appeal. But yeah, no more dicking around and backtracking for codes. Thing is, this game is more like a linear story-driven adventure, so the world map is gone and you now advance to new areas through cutscenes. I actually quite like this, as I felt that the backtracking in the first game was a bit tedious. But like I already said just now, it also takes away from the arcadey appeal. So I can kinda see how some people might view this as a bad thing. Now, in terms of level design, the game mostly consists out of fairly wide open areas, with multiple paths and tons of enemies sprinkled around the place. And there's also some puzzle-like things here and there, and a couple of events that change up the core gameplay slightly. However, the game is still a bit on the short side, which would have been fine if it didn't hamper the story as much as it does. I mean, just when they establish exactly what's going on, it already starts building towards the end rather quickly. And, well, it just doesn't feel natural. But I guess that on the other hand, despite them adding tons of stuff to the combat, I also feel that the gameplay wouldn't have been varied enough to really lend itself to a longer experience. So yeah, whether or not the game's length is a problem kinda depends on which it is you value over the other. Anyway, this game is a lot better than the first, and it looks pretty cool too. I mean, there's a reason there's posters of it all over Twin Snakes. which is Konami wanting to promote its other series and Kojima being extremely self-referential. But what I mean is that this game feels like it deserves the references. Not only because I think it's very good, but also because it's overshadowed by MGS in every single way. And yeah, I can totally see why. I mean, I honestly think that the similar theming and fonts were done for recognition's sake. Not to mention the fact that the first game was basically used as a vessel for the MGS2 demo. So, in a way, I kind of feel that this series was doomed to be in the shadows right from the get-go by what I can only assume are decisions Konami made in the hopes of selling the game to MGS fans. Which is kind of a shame if you ask me.
Yeah, those assholes totally took away my spotlight. Ada should have been famous. Ada's Winky is bigger than Snake's. Snake is not even a robot. Ada is love. Ada is life. Peace out, homies.